Assalamu alaikum and hello everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Justice for All Now. I'm your host, Hena Zuberi, and today we will be talking about battling racism from within the Muslim community. Given the recent events of George Floyd's death and the ongoing protests demanding justice and accountability from law enforcement, it is important for non-Black Muslims to understand how to be strong allies in difficult times like these to our Black Muslim brothers and sisters, in addition to the overall Black community in the United States. But even before that, we cannot be strong allies. We cannot achieve change outside if we do not achieve change within our own communities, within our own institutions, within our own families. To discuss this and much more, I have two brilliant guests with me today. My first guest is Remaz AbdelGader. Remaz is a Sudanese American community organizer and human rights activist who served her community and other marginalized community groups for the last 7 years, mashallah. She's currently the co-founder of SAND, which is the Sudanese American for Nonviolent Demonstration, and a member leader of JMC, Justice for Muslim Collectives, a grassroots organization focused on raising political consciousness and shifting narratives in the greater Washington region. She holds a bachelor's degree in conflict analysis and resolution and is minor in pre-law immigration studies from George Mason University. Thank you for joining us today, Remaz.
Thank you, Hannah. I'm so happy to be here and super excited to have this super important conversation.
Alhamdulillah. I'm just going to bring you on screen because we can't see you yet. Okay, there you are. Great. Alhamdulillah. And in a minute, I'm going to be also inviting another guest of ours, Brother Karim Amin, on screen. But before we bring him on board, I wanted to talk to you, Remaz. Remaz, you have started a campaign, a personal campaign using your own social media platforms, specifically talking about racism within the Muslim community. Can you tell me a little bit more about your campaign?
Yeah, sure. So this campaign was inspired by not necessarily the store owner. That's not the main conversation that's currently being had. It's the store in which George Floyd was trying to make the purchase, and then the counterfeit bill came into appearance. Is owned by an Arab brother, and that store has existed in that space for more than 30 years. They've been in that business. So my campaign, or the verbiage of my letter addressing the Arab community, is not necessarily to that store owner, but to the Arab world. And my letter invites people to have conversations first within themselves, as well as their homes, and see the implicit biases that they've learned through their language, through the movies that they grew up watching, through the conversations that they've had in their communities, and address that racism, because that racism, although it's not a direct reason for the death of George Floyd, but what I seek to argue is had our community, the Arab community, the Desi community, and the entire non-Black community, if they are aware of the issues that plight and plague the African American community, they would be a lot more forward thinking in their thoughts and in their actions, and understanding that all actions have implications. So that's just kind of the gist of the original post that has now become a campaign. It's been viewed over 100,000 times on Instagram, and it's been shared over 6,000 times on Instagram, and people across the world, both locally and globally in the international world, are having a conversation regarding implicit biases and how our complacency can kill, essentially.
And what is implicit bias?
So these are essentially biases that you have, but you're not really aware of, right? So you're operating in this world at viewing a certain situation with your lens, and that lens, of course, is constructed through your nurture. It's constructed through your nurture, right? Your household, and then of course also nature, your involvement in the world, how you move, your interactions, your experiences, and essentially these are biases that we have, and we all have them, right? Because you don't grow up thinking, oh, this is a wrong way of thinking, until you're challenged to view and see if this thinking of yours is indeed faulty. But we need to be aware of them, because these biases, especially when it comes to law enforcement, they've led to the death of our African American brothers and sisters, because the Black man's body has unfortunately become synonymous with violence and terror and a threat. So when they see that, instead of addressing the issue at hand, they perceive you as a threat, and therefore they want to terminate the threat. So what I'm inviting us to do is explore those implicit biases within our homes and within our own consciousness, and try to shift them and understand, why is it that we say what we say? Why is it that we regard people in this way? Why are we so afraid of dark-skinned people? Why are we that when we're in the masajid and a Black person comes in that is not familiar to the community, we kind of repulse? Why is it that when we have a Black brother or a Black sister that's trying to marry into our families, we recoil? We're suddenly upset and scared. I know that this is a very difficult conversation, but unfortunately, it's one that must happen. My campaign.
Go ahead.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes. So this is unfortunately a very difficult conversation, something that's very uncomfortable, but it needs to happen because it's existed for far too long. So yes, this was a letter that I addressed, and I called it Letter to Ammu. And it's basically asking people to ask themselves, why is it that we use the word abid in our households, and in our communities? Why is it that we regard people this way, right? So that's kind of the gist of it. But it's, mashallah, it's had some it's had quite the feedback, some really good feedback, and some very bad feedback. But greatly, it's sparked a conversation, and that's essentially what I want to do. And a lot of people are reaching out saying, thank you for starting this conversation, because it's a hard one to have. And I have love for my Arab brothers and sisters. I love them madly. I love my Desi community. In fact, I was raised in a Desi community, right? Since I was 6 years old. The masjid in my corner is a Pakistani masjid, which I'm an active member of, right? I help lead a girls' halaqa there at the masjid. But these are just really important conversations that we need to have.
So this is a little frustrating for me, because, as we've talked about this before, is this exact same conversation was held perhaps 10 years ago by another young activist, and now she's a mom and married and everything, Hakima Cummings. The same, don't call me Abid, right? And so it's very frustrating to be viewing this and see that these things do not change. For a decade passes, and I'm sure before Hakima there might have been another young sister, or Zakia writes about this with such fervor, who's a Black writer, just one of the founders of Islamic fiction. Why is it, like, from your the comments that you've received, the things that have the replies that you've gotten, what are the themes that you are seeing that can answer my frustration why things do not change?
Okay. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says Allah does not change a society until they change what's within themselves. And I think for far too long, we see what's happening, and then we just stated, mashallah, brilliant women that I follow have had this exact same conversation. But unfortunately, a lot of people, they just grace over it. It's a very uncomfortable conversation. If I told you that your way of being is incorrect, if I told you that your way of regard is incorrect, it's racist, that's a very difficult thing on the soul, right? And I think this ayah here has literally provided us the structure. If we want to see structural change, right? If we want to see structural change and we want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us as a Muslim community, as a collective community, a collective ummah to have this change, then it needs to start in the house. We need to have these conversations with our children. We need to understand that when you say al-abda, right? And or we're not gonna move to into this neighborhood because it has black people, or all of this stuff. Subhanallah, all of these thoughts are constructed by what we take in as what we consume as consumers, right? And what we hear in our environment. I've had few responses in which people literally wrote me and said it was very common for us to use those words in our houses.
So maybe let's address that, because I think there was a question on the feed as well. What does that mean for a lot of people who may not speak Arabic? Yeah. What does abid or abda mean?
It means slave. That's literally what it means. And if you think about the black people history in America, they came here through slavery, right? So if you're constantly regarding black people as slaves, you're implying a notion. It's not just a word. You're implying many things. What did slaves do, right? They worked the fields. They were disregarded. They were hung, right? They were kept away. They were marginalized. They were disenfranchised. All of these horrific things happened to slaves. That's what's attached to that word. The words are powerful. So when you continue to use this word slave or servant and apply it to black Muslims or black people, you're subconsciously allowing yourself to regard or disregard people in this way, right? You're seeing them as slaves, people that do not have concerns, or that do not have fears or hopes or desires that matter just as much as yours does. And in this way, you dehumanize them, right? And what we've learned from like the structural steps to genocide and the termination of the actual physical body, the last step in a genocide, right before the denial, is the actual physical termination of life. But that dehumanizing, that classification, that symbolization, all of those are steps that precede the physical elimination of the body. So this is what I want to deconstruct and unpack, is when you use this word, abd or abid or an-nas as-sudel, or you kind of throw these words out, you're literally shaping your child's mind to disregard, to not see them as worthy of life, right? And it's been really interesting because some of the responses I've received have regarded him as George Floyd as a bum, as a thief, and other words that I'm not going to utter in this space. May God rest his soul. So it's so interesting. I'm not so shocked, because if these are the narratives and these are the stereotypes that some people have in their homes, it's very easy to push that aside where you're not concerned. Now, when you see an issue such as Palestine and all these issues, you know me, and we work together. I'm always out in the forefront, in the front lines, advocating for everything, because also the Prophet ﷺ has taught us that if one human dies in our ummah, it's the whole humanity is affected. So we have to protect every single person in this community. But that's because us as Black Muslims, the majority of us have regarded all lives as sacred, right? But unfortunately, other people, they don't have that same level of energy and frustration, and that's what we're angry about. Like, I've seen people when I'm like, Black Lives Matter, they're like, but all lives matter. And I have to ask myself, how much, do I want to engage and try to educate? It gets really exhausting because we're having the same conversation again and again and again. So now my thing is, have these conversations in your homes. That's where it starts.
SubhanAllah. And this is someone's watching from Afghanistan, mashallah.
Yeah.
Alaikum salam. So this is a great a segue to bring in Brother Karim into this conversation, because as an African-American Black man living in Baltimore City, as a leader in the Muslim community, there are many, a lot of things that you have said he has experienced. And this is, in our conversation, like, I want to have his perspective as well, especially like when you share some of these comebacks that people are, so we can deconstruct them, and then the conversation can move on to structural changes. Because one thing, let me bring Brother Karim on board, and then we can definitely move on to this conversation. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, I am doing well. Thank you so much for being here. And
Thanks for having me.
please let our audience know currently, what are you keeping yourself busy with? I know you have been a vital part of the Muslim Social Service Agency in Baltimore City, but currently you have a new role.
Yes. So, assalamu alaikum to everyone, and peace to everyone here. Again, my name is Karim Amin. I'm the co-founder of Muslim Social Services Agency, which services the Muslim community, but also all communities, specifically communities of color here in Baltimore, which comprises over 70% of our city. We also serve immigrant populations as well. The work that I'm currently doing is actually in 21217. It was an area that was affected through trauma, through physical violence, because of the murder of Freddie Gray at the hands of Baltimore City Police in 2015. So it's really just very, for me, disturbing. I have to say, a lot of anger now at this point, and really mad that we're having the same conversation 5 years later regarding our Muslim community. We are having the same conversation we had in 2001 after 9/11. We're having the same conversation that we had after Rodney King, and the conversations that my parents had during the riots in 68 that were in Baltimore City. So for me, I continue to work in this neighborhood and try to use arts and culture. We actually just established the first Black arts district in Baltimore. And there was a reason for that, because in order to assist Black communities, you have to center it around Blackness. Mm-hmm. I know some people say, well, what does that mean? What that means is that we have to be very careful when we're engaging with our communities, especially our African-American communities, because we know African-American Muslims were the primary founders of Islam here in this country, but yet we oftentimes are under the foot, unfortunately, the literal knee of racism by police and also by our own community. Myself, I've experienced the majority of the racism, unfortunately, that I've engaged with has been in the Muslim community. As our sister was just saying about people calling you an abid, or don't allow you to come to make prayer in the masjid at certain times, or if you're dressed in a certain way or have a certain hairstyle that they don't approve of, they think that you're a gangster, they think that you're a thug. They think that you don't belong around. If I may, just for 10 seconds, just reflect on an issue that occurred actually in between the Freddie Gray uprising and what's going on now with our brother George Floyd. At one of our communities, we had a young sister who it was found she had committed suicide in our local community. And she was a young student, 12 years old, at a local school here in Baltimore. I won't say the school yet because it's not the focus. But when she committed suicide, one thing that came out was that she was the victim of racism, not just by her classmates, but by the administration at the school. And she unfortunately took her life. And one of the things she kept reflecting on when she would talk to her friends and talk to her family was that she was constantly bullied for being Black. She was constantly bullied for being a young Black woman, and told that, oh, she's too overly sexual because she was Black, even though she was covered in a full abaya. Not that that matters, but she was harassed because of that. Because of her being Black, she was called different names. And these things led to, unfortunately, her committing suicide. And when this occurred, there was a huge uproar online about the reasoning why she committed suicide. And what we said was that we have to deal with the systemic issues that are here. We're not going to debate back and forth of whether or not it was a direct result or indirect result, but we lost a young person due to that. And after that, we sat with the community. We had some really, really, really honest conversations with people that thought that they were aware, or what people say now, woke, but they were not. And over 300 to 400 members of the community came out and we discussed these issues. So I will pause there for a second. But these are the things that we're dealing with. And this was several years ago. And now we're dealing with the exact same thing now. And I still, as our sister said, it's dealing with people calling individuals Abid, dealing with people saying that, well, Black issues aren't my issue. Well, was he Muslim? What was his iman like? Okay, so now we can defend him because he fits within this box of what we think a Muslim should be. And that's not what it's about.
And this happened in my community. This happened, and and we felt like there would be change. We felt like, okay, nothing more terrible than this can happen. So this would be the point where collectively we could bring about that change. And unfortunately, this is where it tears me apart, is like the ball keeps getting dropped and it's the same four faces, and it's, and it's not something that we put our heart and soul into, perhaps. Like, it's not consistent, and it just is yes, 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 because the spotlight is on me right now. But then once the spotlight goes away, life, shaitan, everything else, our biases, everything comes back, and people become comfortable again until the next hashtag or the next horrible incident, or the next kid who's a cop is called on the kid while he's playing basketball and gets into a scuffle. So, and this is something that we, as a lot of us look upon each one of us as leadership, right?
Yes.
What is our responsibility? What is my responsibility? What is your responsibility? How much load should we keep? What do we do? Like, what, honestly, like, let's be honest with each other here. Like, where are we losing it? Like, I had to step away from the Muslim community to work honestly on any of these issues, because I just felt like I was running around in a circle. And on a wheel, and go to the Black community in Prince George's County and work there, so we could address some of these systematic police accountability issues, things, really work with the people, work in DC with people on the ground there, because I just wasn't seeing any changes. We would get the yes, 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 it's going to happen. And some things have happened. Some of the schools have hired Black counselors. Like, that's a great thing. That was something that we asked. It took 3 years for a change like that to occur. Alhamdulillah that it did. But why does it take so long? And what is our responsibility?
Go ahead, Brother Karim.
Yeah. Are you sure? Okay. All right. That's a loaded question. Very loaded question. I would say one of the first things that we have to do is honor those that were here first. That's the first thing that we have to do. We got to honor it. Jazakallah. We got to, because if we don't honor the people that were here first, then we can never proceed with our next generations. We have to educate our youth within our school systems, public school systems, but definitely in our Muslim schools and in the mosque. We have to start to educate them about the founders of Islam and start to normalize Blackness. Stop making Blackness some extra thing that's on the side. or something to the left, or a little spice that we like to put on when we eat our chicken, and we say we like to use certain colloquialisms and words when it's convenient for us. Don't just ask us to come out and support causes for the Kashmir or for Palestine. I've been in countless fundraisers. I've worked for organizations that support those places in those countries. But yet when we ask for assistance for Haiti, we ask for assistance for Baltimore City, we ask for assistance for Little Haiti in Miami, it's, well, that's not my responsibility. That's not my community. It's their fault. So normalize Blackness and also stop being, what I like to say is the moral police. Mm-hmm. And stop thinking that we can only help out individuals that we totally agree with everything that they're doing or not doing. Because we're not even like that in our own community. So how can we do this for George Floyd? They don't even know who this man is. So as a sister says, he's placing judgments on him before his body is even cold and in the ground, subhanAllah. So we have to educate, and then we also have to normalize it and stop making it like it's something extra when it's really the foundation of our culture here in America.
That's and this is something, this is a mistake we made post 9/11 when we did not center. I mean, we may have been making these mistakes, but that to me is a turning point where because we did not center those who were before us then. And I believe we're reaping what we sowed then, because we were too busy being the model minority. We were too busy being, and I'm talking to where I come from. And, you know, it was more important for Dr. Sahab to be up front because our, you know, Brother Maury wasn't good enough. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, this is,
absolutely.
And we consistently keep doing it. It doesn't stop. It doesn't stop. We consistently keep doing it, and we don't stop centering ourselves because of. And I honestly believe, from whatever I've studied, it's because we are a colonized nation too. And, absolutely. You know, we still are, you know, we're still worshiping the white Lord Batten, you know. Yeah. That's I mean, and we have to be real about that. Even those of us who were born and raised here, we're still, and we think, you know, it's cute and cool to have these hashtags and the you know, it's easy on social media to do say all of these things, and I'm glad people are saying that, and I'm not going to say that they shouldn't be, but what the hard work when you are at a meeting, you know, actually going to the police station, who is there? You can count the names and the faces, and 99% of the time they're not Muslim, because that's not going to be a photo opportunity for our community leadership. Because you're not standing next to the police chief. You're actually going to deliver a petition to ask them to change their ways. So you're going against the police chief. Right? So, you know, again, that aspiring for power. Remaz, what do you think is our responsibility?
I lovely your points, and I just want to go back to your question. You said there's like this time when we stop caring, right? We go into our homes. What we must understand is that unaffected communities go back home. People like myself and the brother and other Black Muslims, this is our lives, right? This is our lives. It's not like we can take off our skin, right? Like we go into the world with the skin complexion. People look at me, yes, I'm from Sudan, but they still see me as a Black Muslim woman, right? That's how they perceive me, and that's how they'll perceive my children going into this world. So I think the only way that we can eliminate this, you know, activism that happens, you know, for a few weeks, a few days, etc., is to really center these Black voices in these institutions. You know, I think all our masajids, that we need to have a program there where it literally teaches all the Muslims that attend that masjid about where they found Islam, where the Islam in America originates from. When you tie Islam, you can use identity to mobilize people, right? MashaAllah, Muslims, they're very attached to their identity. You can use the Muslim identity and show them the direct linkage of it with African American history, right? I think that regard will come. I really am hopeful of it. Because right now we have all of these influxing immigrants, including myself, that come and privilege off of the building blocks that African Americans have laid on the ground. And they just haven't laid it. They died fighting for these rights. They died so that we can claim our Muslim heritage and identity. They died so that our Muslim kids can go to Muslim schools, have Muslim names, and eat halal food. They died to make these things happen. But when you don't operate based with that awareness in mind, it's impossible for you to regard them. In fact, you see them, some members may have tattoos. You see their Islam less than yours, right? You see their Islam, something that is not something that is not legitimate. I've had a lot of Black Muslims that tell me that when they walk into a space and they have a degree to teach or something, their Islam is always questioned. So this is what we need to do. We need to go back into our communities, have more Black imams leading those communities, and teach that to our children.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one other thing, thank you so much for saying that. My sister, another thing that we have to do in regards to leadership is we have to also start holding individuals accountable. I know some people that are the most righteous of Muslims. I pray next to them, but yet they own gas stations where young Black males are, and some people think it's a choice. Many times it's almost like a force because it's a job. And so they're hustling right outside. They're selling drugs right outside of their gas stations. They're selling the cigarettes. They're selling the other, the sugar. They're selling the poison. They're selling all of these things that are associated with urban culture, but then yet they go to the masjid and we judge them. You come here, you living off of privilege, you're making millions and millions of dollars off of Black blood, Black bodies, feeding them unhealthy food, feeding them unhealthy messages to benefit your family. But yet you want to judge them when they come to your masjids and ask for solutions. You want to judge them when they don't talk the way that you talk. And so that's another thing. We have to start holding each other accountable, even economically, because that's where I think a lot of the discomfort is coming in. Because it's okay for us to say, no, I agree. A person should not be killed, should not be kneeled on, should not be abused. We all are Muslim brothers and sisters. But when it comes to being a leader, you may not know too much. You may not be an authentic Muslim. As my sister said eloquently earlier, you asked to marry someone in their family. No, we can't do that. That's unacceptable. When you ask them to remove certain things from their community that they're benefiting and that their family is eating off of, no, we can't. No, we got to continue to sell what we need to sell in our stores. And on top of that, not support the communities that we're actually bringing down with the products that we're bringing into the communities.
Exactly. Not giving back.
And then we value those buildings when they are burnt. We value those things way more than people. And then on this one last point, a lot of times people blame these rioters or protesters or uprisers for causing the confusion when actually they're agent provocateurs that are coming in, setting fire to these things.
Exactly.
Because I want to clarify one thing that, go ahead. I'm sorry, Sister Hena. Yeah.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Because in Baltimore City, one of the prevailing pictures that was constantly showed was that CVS being burnt at Pennsylvania Avenue and North Avenue, where I do a lot of work at. But many people don't know that a police task force that has now had about 6 to 7 individuals indicted on major crimes. These are police officers. Baltimore City police officers were the ones that broke in. They were the ones that set the fire. And they was the one that were in contact with certain leaders and other, as they call them, gangs, to come in and steal the drugs and sell them back in our communities. So these are the things that are happening as well. So not only are we being rejected by the communities, we are also being destroyed and hurt by the very system that's supposed to protect us. And then when we say they're not telling the truth, when we say that they're lying, we are rejected and we're called emotional. I don't know what you're talking about. Just leave. But these are our homes. We're not going to leave. We're going to protect them with our lives. Thank you. Thank you very much.
SubhanAllah. That is, and you know what? When one was the most powerful images for me from after the Baltimore uprising was of your father cleaning up that street, right? And we plastered that all over the newspaper because that is what Muslims do, and that is what elders like your father have done, and you know, many more like him. It's because who cleans up after all these protesters leave, and who
our elders.
Exactly.
Our elders.
This is and you know, something that you both mentioned, and I want to talk about this a little bit because Michelle Alexander, in her book New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness, she talks about this, and this was a big aha moment for me, because when she writes that when we think of racism, we think of Governor Wallace of Alabama blocking the schoolhouse door, we think of water hoses, lynching, whites only signs, and these images make it really easy to forget the many wonderful, good-hearted white people who were generous to others. They were respectful of their neighbors. They were kind to their black maids and gardeners and shoe shiners, and they wished them well. But when they went to the polls, they never voted for they voted for racial segregation.
Exactly.
This really hit a nerve with me because this is what we do in the Muslim community, even if we like to admit it or not. We think, oh, I'm not a racist because I didn't go out and shoot somebody because of the color of their skin, or I didn't physically stop, even though Remaz was sharing that there are masajid that even physically stop, but I didn't go ban a Muslim person, or I didn't say no blacks allowed in my masjid. And so therefore, I'm not racist. So we sort of associate racism with the most violent of exhibitions of racism. So then so when we're consciously or subconsciously not voting for a black brother or sister who's running for the board of the masjid, we're doing the exact same thing, right? Like that's racial segregation in just a Muslim setting. Or when we say it's too hard to not call the cops and we can't change our policies, we do not address the policies at our institutions. You know, and even with the best of intentions, what are we sometimes doing to make our own? And I can say this for even the places I work at. What have we done that makes it unwelcoming for Black Muslims to want to work there? You know, obviously you're not saying, oh, no Blacks need to apply, but what limitations have we done? Those are the sort of things that each, if nothing else, at this moment where it's COVID and all of this that we're experiencing, that the least we can do is take a self-reflective look inside our families, but most importantly, inside our institutions, inside our organizations. What are we tokenizing people? Are we just hiring somebody just for that one person, but not, you know, they're there, they have a title now, but no one's really listening to what they have to say. SubhanAllah. We have one more guest. MashaAllah. This was, and I want to introduce the brother, Jazakallah khair, Brother Azhar, for being here. Brother Azhar Abdusebur is from Minneapolis, Minnesota, and is currently working in data and analytics in Cigna Healthcare, and has studied math and IT at the University of Minnesota. He began youth and community work with Building Blocks Founding, and building their Young Brothers Youth Program in 2010. Currently, he's the youth mentor at Pearls of Hope and continues to be a youth and community advisor at Mass, Building Blocks, and other community organizations across the Twin Cities. So, Jazakallah khair, thank you so much for being here with us today. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, doing well. Jazakallah khairan for having me. I appreciate it. Glad to be here. and listening to these amazing and powerful conversations.
SubhanAllah, how is your community doing?
Alhamdulillah, it's been very hectic to say the least. SubhanAllah, these last few days have felt like a month has gone by, even though it's only been a few days. SubhanAllah, I actually live very close to. Currently, I'm not there right now, but I live like 2 blocks away from where everything's happening. So a lot of it has been very visceral, has been very real for me personally. On top of the fact that I used to work at the location where the unfortunate tragic events happened of the death of George Floyd. So it's been a very, very interesting last few days for all of us.
I can't even imagine. Being you were part of that community. You worked in that store. What are your feelings about, if you would care to share, about what has happened and especially the aftermath?
Yeah, SubhanAllah, it's very. Sometimes you don't know what to feel when you see these situations, right? You almost think like, there's been a few times during this weekend, for example, where I've talked to people around me. We're kind of just reflecting, like, are we in a movie? Like, is this actually real life that's happening right now? And SubhanAllah, it's just you kind of take it day by day, right? From the tragic events that unfolded, the video that we kept seeing over and over, really paining a lot of people, and seeing what happens after that, right? People's justified anger, and people, expressing themselves, but unfortunately, as we've seen, there's, other people taking advantage of the situation, right? Like Brother Karim was telling us, right? Unfortunately, there's people, provocateurs going around and destroying, and subhanAllah, our own businesses, right? The same communities that were actually the most affected by this are the ones that are being damaged the most, especially by people who don't care for our community. And it's very disheartening to see. Actually, one of my uncles, who owns a furniture store, had his furniture store burned down completely, subhanAllah. It just within a matter of a day. And it's very unfortunate, and it only adds more pain to the pain that we're already feeling.
SubhanAllah. So, and I'd like to bring all of our guests together so we can all talk to you. Remaz, if you have any questions of Brother Azhar or Brother Karim, and vice versa, I wanted to spend some time with each other, talking to each other. And we all live in very different but similar communities. A lot of the issues nationally are the same. Where do we go from here? I really, this is one thing that, as and Brother Karim and I have discussed this several times, is, every time something like this happens, you hope this is the linchpin that will make that change. Like, this is it. Like, we cannot go back to the status quo. Let's, and yes, we leave behind and Imam Zaid Shakir said very eloquently in his speech a couple of days, I think last night, that and urging people, their righteous anger is righteous anger. Of course, that's a part of our where we come from and our teachings. But when it's spiraling out of control, and how, but we want to harness this energy and want to put it to work. So within each of your communities, please share with the audience, and maybe if they're positive actions, because we want to make this action oriented, we want to keep this sustainable, want to have people really help rebuild. We talked about this, Remaz, that sometimes you need to strip everything down to rebuild, and rebuild in a beautiful way without the ugliness of racism. And it might seem unattainable, but we've seen it happen in Arabia. We have seen it, the Prophet, do this. We have the truth. We know we can use the truth to make this happen. So what, please share with us within your community. Brother Azhar, if you want to go first, because I know you have been, and then and we'll go clockwise.
Yeah. No, I think a lot of times it's, I know, especially at least in my community, what I've felt has been, causing some of these issues is that a lot of times we kind of stay in our own circles, right? For example, I come from the East African Oromo community, Ethiopian community. And, I think it was last year, there's an Oromo masjid, only Oromos come to the masjid, and I started to bring in other friends and other people that, would come into the masjid, and they would kind of look funny and like, oh, who are these people that are coming in here? And, we wouldn't have, for example, the Oromos or the Somali brothers go to the masjid that's predominantly African-American or things like that. And I think it's, first of all, having those conversations, and second of all, connecting the communities, right? Not being stuck into your own ethnic enclaves. Like I think sister was saying, right, or Sister Hena, I think you were talking about how, yeah, maybe you're not racist. Maybe, mashallah, you're very religious. You pray, you do all the things that you do, but you're silent. You use language that you probably shouldn't be using, right? You have biases that maybe you don't even know you have because you don't interact with other people, right? And I think hopefully what I would hope from what's happening around is to show, hey, first of all, we need to come together. We need to work with each other. We need to get to know each other, right? And, subhanAllah, one thing that's amazing about Minnesota is, if there's a big Somali community here. And it is the Somalis, mashallah, that are amazing, doing amazing in the Quran competitions. They're really the face of the deen in Minnesota. But, they're not given that credit, right? They're not believed. They're not listened to, right? They're questioned like, oh, brother, how do you know this? Or how do you, how are you, mashallah, good at this thing? And it's like, this has been in our history. And on top of that, for example, at the store where the unfortunate events happened, downstairs is actually a masjid where primarily African-American and minority communities attend, right? They have Jummah there, they have Ramadan there. And subhanAllah, nobody knows that community. They don't help that community. There's an Imam, Allah yarhamu, he passed away last year, Imam Abdul African-American imam who's been doing da'wah work and amazing work in that community for 30 plus years. Mm-hmm. The story isn't highlighted. People don't know him as much, and he's actually the one that gave me personally the platform to start doing work in the community, right? But we don't highlight those stories. We don't connect with those communities. People don't know even about that community, right? But it's because we have that division, that separation, that we're not working together. Oh, that's just a black masjid. Oh, that's just a Somali masjid. And I think that's one very important thing that we need to break down, that we need to try to get people together, have those conversations and see, hey, how can we work together to actually move forward, right? How can we now use the resources that we have? SubhanAllah, one amazing thing that opened my eyes over the last few days is seeing people actually starting to come together, right? And unfortunately, it had to take something as tragic as this to bring people together. But inshallah, it'll be the first step to actually work on that.
Remaz, you want to go next?
Yeah, mashallah, he articulated it so well. I think it's so important for us to go into different communities. As I mentioned earlier, I grew up in a Desi community. That's my direct masjid. But on the weekends, my parents would also take me to Quran school, the Somali community. So I was exposed, to a multitude of cultures and people and heritages. And we also have to, operate and understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us this in the Quran. He says He's created us into tribes and nations so that we can get to know one another, right? So that we can be with one another, so that we can have community with one another. And that's the most powerful thing. If we really unite as a united front, we can reclaim that power. Because right now it's not a lack of resources or education. MashaAllah, our communities are full of intellect and brilliance and empathy, and they're strategic, but we just need to come together and fight these issues in a unison. And unfortunately, that's not what's happening right now. But in particularly, what I want people to do is to have these conversations in their homes. Before you can even come together, you need to have these conversations within your own self. Look inward, right? Ask yourself, what are my biases? If something triggers you, inch closer to that discomfort. And learn about the history of African Americans in this country and how they are instrumental. They are the foundation of what has brought us this now. If it wasn't for their work, if it wasn't for their death, if it wasn't for their activism, their plights, their fights, we wouldn't be able to have these businesses. We wouldn't be able to accumulate these educations and have the society that we live in right now. So the only way that we can structurally tackle this is through knowledge, and education is really powerful. And also, spending time with one another. Don't stop your activism now. You're enraged, yes, but I want to challenge you. What are you going to do next, right? I highlighted earlier, it's very easy for you to forget when you're not affected by this. But our brothers here, they're black skinned. They go into this world. That's how they exist, right? That's how people view them. So look inwards within yourself. See what are your biases. Rework your mind. Fix your subconscious thoughts, right? And then go into community. Break fast at different masajids. Invite people from different places and different countries into your home. Go into the community. Empower them. If you have money, put your money there, right? Fun projects like our brother Karim's projects, right? Or brother Azhar's work, right? These are important stuff, right? That's all I have to say.
Can I ask you a question? Before I go to Brother Karim. So a lot of our mosques boards, we run on this voting system, right? And every 4 years, and a lot of them don't have, it becomes like a popularity contest, or it becomes like, oh, I'm going to bring in my friends from all these other different communities, and at the end of the day, they're the ones who run. Should we change that system?
Yes.
Should there be mandated, a mandated seat and a mandated African American seat?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. If I can, speak to this a little bit. In my masjid, this is public knowledge. I was challenged, right? This is the first time where there's a black sister who's leading the youth. My knowledge of Islam was challenged. I had males challenge me behind a curtain and ask me about where I get my Islamic knowledge, right? And it's very frustrating because there were sisters who led the same community that were Pakistani, but because their parents were also Pakistani and they knew members of the board, this was an acceptable thing. And we had one brother that was actively fighting, a younger father that was actively fighting to ensure that our community was involved in these ways and wouldn't go back to their backward ways. We've had black imams. They're gone. Our masjid currently doesn't even have an imam. And this is not a story that's only particular to my masjid, right? A lot of masajid are like this. But that's why I keep going back to the internal biases. Allah does not change what's within a society until they change what's within themselves. So yes, absolutely mandate that there are key leadership position in these institutions, right? Because these people can come in already with the knowledge of the structural violence, already with the knowledge that these systems are built on whiteness and they're inherently meant to serve whiteness. So we need to be able to center black issues. And when we fight for black Americans, we're going to be fighting for everybody, right? We're going to be fighting for everybody. So our masjids absolutely need to make mandatory specific leadership roles, and also they need to ask themselves, why are they so upset or distrusting or unaware of black stories like Brother Azhar's sheikh from that masjid? We need to make these stories known, right? We need to make the black sahabas known. There's so many Islamic literature that I've read that literally like don't highlight the African black sahabas. These stories highlight the black people that built Islam in this country. I don't mean to go on the tangent, but we need to confront these biases, understand that Islam was given to us by black people, and absolutely mandate key leadership positions. Our imams. There's a ton of people out there. I know a lot of black brothers, mashallah, that are currently students in Azhar and in Egypt and Saudi Arabia and in other places that are learning Islam. Put those people in key positions. Let's actually make that work. I think that's our best bet in trying to combat this structurally.
Thank you, Jazakallah. Brother Karim.
Very well said, both of you. Alhamdulillah. First, my brother in Minnesota, we're with you. We're with you here in Baltimore, and we're praying for you, and we're with you, inshallah. And me, I hope that I can actually make a trip out there, when possible, to be able to get together. Because what we need to do, you all said it so well, is we have to strategize, we have to organize, and we have to have consistent coalitions. And I'm saying that because now is the time for us to strategize, because that's the biggest fear for a lot of people that want to sustain systems of white supremacy. We have to first admit that this white supremacy exists, that it is a structure that affects all of us, including our own homes. I don't know how many of my Desi brothers and sisters that'll come to me, specifically sisters, and they'll say when they were born, their mothers or their grandmothers looked and said, are they dark or are they going to be light? Astaghfirullah. That's all I have to say. Because when you're judging someone from a baby on the color of their skin, that is really what you're doing is you're supporting the systems of systemic racism, systemic white supremacy that's existed from India, Pakistan. It's the same thing, South Africa, and the United States. So we have to organize. We got to strategize and consistent coalitions. Don't just say, I want to be your friend now while, like you said, you're in the media, or I can raise money for my nonprofit organization, or I can be in front of the camera or be with important people. Be with us every single day. Like the brother said, come to those mashes and pray. Like the sister said, put African-American brothers in positions of leadership and sisters also in positions of leadership, because we have a lot of sisters that are our sahabiyat that are here, that help to establish Islam here. And our black women, that their bodies are often beaten on, their bodies and their mentality are often disrespected and thrown to the side. And stay consistent in your family. If you hear someone in your family that says, oh, well, you're lighter, so you're a little bit better than the person that's dark, or they're even making those jokes, tell them, no, that's something that we're not going to joke about. If you hear someone in your family calling someone an abid or something like that, even in anger, no, we're not going to accept that. And like they said, actively reach out to African-American communities if you haven't already. And don't go in saying, I want to give you a handout. It's a hand up. And that hand up is just making prayer. That hand up is just honoring them in their stories and centering their stories in their communities, but also in your own community. Because as was said several times, the African-American story, the African-American Muslim story is the American story. And so without that, you will not have Islam here. Without those slaves that toiled and were abused and were mistreated for hundreds of years during Jim Crow and now so-called post-Jim Crow, you have to honor that on a continuous and a constant basis. So inshallah, I will stop. I'll just stop there. But let's consistently organize. Please, let's make sure that we follow each other. Go to our different websites. Go to givingjusticeforall.org. Support our brothers and sisters in Minnesota. Support this sister and continue to follow them and support them. Not just when it's times of emergency, not just in the times where it's comfortable now to speak out, but when it's uncomfortable for you to speak out, that's the times where we need you to stand up.
Exactly. From my end, I have a platform, a widely watched platform. So I can sustainably say, if I have all of your say or your if you want to have these ongoing conversations, we dedicate according to your schedules, monthly, weekly, whatever you want to do, specifically centered around African-American voices, Black voices, issues that concern the community, the Black community here in the United States, as well as globally. Because if we do anti-genocide work at Justice for All, that's the sort of work that we do, right? We do Muslim minority work. Well, this is a Muslim minority within a Muslim minority. How much more? And a lot of times the work is done behind the scenes and that was something that we internally have been looking at ourselves. Like, why are we pushing publicly these big four, projects that we do on Burma and Kashmir, but the work that we do on Black lives is kind of silent, and we do it, but we don't advertise it, and these conversations are needed, because sometimes we're like, oh, we don't do it because we don't want to center ourselves, and we're just, helping and uplifting. But still, sometimes that in that niyyah, you're erasing the work that needs to, those voices that need to be heard. So that's a commitment on my end that I can, in order to make it sustainable, in order to not just be like, okay, yeah, this is cool, hashtag, blah, 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 and then it's gone. So inshallah, jazakallah khair for all of you for being here, for your time, and for sharing.
Sister Hena.
SubhanAllah, it's not easy. It's not easy to share everything that you guys have shared. I had made a personal pact in my life. I don't share racist moments that I encounter in my community with my Black friends and colleagues, because I feel like I can walk away from that experience and share it with them, but that experience, that's their lived experience, and it stays with them. So that's a personal pledge that I have taken, because once you start studying, or you start realizing what it is, and you see the matrix, it's everywhere. It's, oh my God, it's just like, oh my God, my eyes just opened up. But that's something that, and then that's something that new people who come into the movement, who come into the anti-racism movement, that's something else too, that this is not about you. It's not about centering yourself or the selfies or ranting on Facebook. This is hard work. It might just mean sitting with your local police accountability committee and just monitoring them, and no one would ever know. But every time you look at that committee and they haven't issued a report, writing an email, why isn't the report out? Why isn't the monthly report out? These are the sort of things that need to be done on a consistent basis if we really actually want police to stop killing Black people. It's not going to happen just with the protests. We need to push bills. In Maryland, we have the Antoine's Law. Didn't get passed. I'm sure in Virginia, in Minnesota, there are many laws like that the Muslim community needs to get behind. Yeah, we've run out of time. But subhanAllah, thank you so much to all three of you for being here, and accept it from all of you. So thank you so much, audience, for being here today. This is a difficult conversation, but I hope people are learning from this series that we've been doing. We have a webinar with Dr. Amina McLeod, who is one of the most scholars in the United States on this topic. She's from Chicago. Her and Imam Abdul Malik Mujahid will be having a webinar tomorrow night at 7:00. These are our elders that have been in the struggle for the past 45 years, and even more. So please log in. You can join. You can find us on Justice for All /BLM. Assalamu alaikum.